All right, welcome back, everybody. I'm John Eads, and this is a face you're probably familiar with. We've had him on the show a couple times, Koki Riley from The Advocate. He covers LSU baseball, most in depth right now, but of course several other things too, football and whatnot based on the seasons. But
Basically just baseball and football, but yeah.
Yes, there you go. Right now you're fully locked in on baseball, as are we, because we are right in the middle of the season. Quite literally, not exactly, but just about that time. So I thought it'd be a good time to bring you back on the show here. We chatted before the year, previewing the season. Now we're 34 games in, over the halfway point of the regular season. Certainly LSU fans hoping this isn't the exact halfway point of the season, because that would mean they don't, go very far in the NCAA tournament. But a good time here, I think, to take the pulse, take the temperature on the team, and through 34 games, you kind of discuss what you've liked, what you have yet to see, and kind of where you think this team can go now that you've seen 34 games. So I guess maybe we'll start with the most recent stuff. Team's rolling right now. I mean, they lost to Texas in a series on the road, but they've responded well. They beat Mississippi State on what was a wild weekend for them, for us, everybody, really, the fans. Then they go to Norman. They sweep Oklahoma in very cold and not baseball-friendly weather, as I'm sure you'll discuss. And most recently, they beat Nichols on the road in Thibodaux in a very funky game. And that leaves the team at 31-3 and in a really good spot right now, record-wise in the SEC.
Yeah, absolutely. That Oklahoma series, it was just kind of crazy with the weather. It got to the point with the last game of the series on that Saturday where it was hard to really judge how – it was really hard to take away anything from that game because the weather was affecting so much of it. We're talking 15-ish mile per hour winds coming in from center field. Or we're talking – include the wind chill, it was probably closer to 30 degrees than it was to 40 degrees. It was not weather that was not conducive for baseball. And LSU, like, those are sort of the games that you kind of want to win and put in your back pocket, right? For later, and they did exactly that. And, it's been 4 SEC series, 3 sweeps, which is not. I don't think that's what people expected heading into the season, and they're off to this really great start. Like the opposite of last year when they started 3-12 in conference play. This year they're 10-2, and they're heading into another road trip this weekend. A lot of road series to start the year, but 3 road trips in 4 weeks. But at the same time, Auburn's going to be a solid challenge for them, but it's not. It's still not quite Tennessee or Arkansas, who they're going to face in the back half of the schedule. And we talked about that on our preview show about how the back half of the schedule is going to be even more of a challenge than the front half of the schedule. And you can kind of see that in the numbers so far this year. I think their strength of schedule is around 100 if you look at RPI's metric. And out of all the teams in the top 10, like, that's by far the easiest schedule so far. So they've done a good job of taking advantage of their schedule. Like, we have to give them credit for that, but we have to remind ourselves that the second half is going to be tougher for this team, and that's going to determine whether they're a super regional host or just a regional host.
Thanks for doing that. I did want to dive back into that conversation because I remember sitting here with the schedule, and it aligns pretty well. I mean, the teams that we expected to be decent but not elite, it's kind of panned out that way, aside from Texas, obviously, and that's the one series you've lost. So it is definitely going to ramp up here in the back half of the season. But with that said, we also made the point that by then, this team should be playing its best baseball when they're playing in those big competitive series. I just really want to take a couple moments, though, to really think about what this team's done, because it's so easy to take for granted what they're doing. They're 31-3. Yes, they've won national championships in the past, but this is the best start they've had, at least since 2013. As they keep racking up these wins, the dates seem to go back further and further. I mean, why has this team gotten off to the start through 34 games?
Well, I think the biggest difference between this year's team and last year's team, if you remember, I think it's the offense. I think it's the fact that they have 9 guys in the order who can reliably put the ball in play. They got power up and down the lineup. Not a ton of massive boppers like we sort of talked about in our preview show.
Yeah.
But guys like Daniel Dickinson has 8 home runs. Stephen Milam has 6, I believe. They have a lot of guys in that 4 to 7 range in the home run total. And they're sort of getting power for up and down the lineup, and sort of that group effort with that power. I think they lead the SEC in double still. They're second in the SEC in batting average. Arkansas overtook them after they absolutely destroyed Missouri this past week. So I think that offensively, that's kind of the massive difference between last year's team and this year's team, because I think this year's team, the pitching is maybe a hair better, I'd say.
Okay.
But it's somewhat similar in the fact that you have I think like last year's team had the two aces, right? You had Gage Jump and Luke Holman. Right now you have at least one of those guys in Kate Anderson. I wouldn't say that Anthony Eidsen's totally there yet, but I'm not going to rule it out. And but at the same time, like, you have a third starter, unlike the team last year. So like there's some similarities and some differences. I don't think there's I just say that because like I don't think there's a huge difference between the pitching staffs from these past 2 seasons. The big difference to me is at the plate and offensively, and the fact that you have a guy like Chris Stanfield who I'd say is an above average SEC player, hitting 9th for you, playing excellent defense in center field. Like, you just didn't really have that last year. I think that guy's kind of a perfect example of what they're doing well offensively.
A lot of depth in the lineup, and you mentioned the pitching staffs. Yeah, I mean, last year's group was maybe better at some things. This year's group is maybe better at some other specific things as well. Every team has its, imperfections and stuff. I want to dive into that in a couple moments. I think what I want to do, though, for a couple minutes is talk about midseason awards, kind of like who your midseason MVP is, most improved, surprise player. Why don't we start with midseason MVP?
Ooh,
I know I'm putting you on the spot, but you're good to answer this.
Yeah. Midseason MVP. Oh boy,
it's hard because there's so many options.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I lean Jared.
Okay.
I don't feel fantastic about it, but given how well he's done at sort of cutting down the swing and miss on stuff in the zone, and being able to just put more balls in play to combine that with the power, that's been like a really promising sign for them.
You think about his impact, too. I mean, stats, certainly, what he does at the plate, but how he affects Daniel Dickinson and Derek Currio and whoever's hitting cleanup.
Yeah.
It extends beyond just what he does.
Exactly. But sort of the power of this team is that they have a bunch of guys who are above average SEC players. And then a couple guys you could say are stars, if not at least arguably stars, right? Like a Daniel Dickinson's kind of an example of that. Derek Curriell at times, even though he's slowed down a little bit at the plate recently, but it's hard to hit 400 for an entire season, man. He's still getting on base, dude. That on base streak is still going.
Yep.
And then on the pitching side, I think there's like a strong argument for like Zach Cowan or Kason Evans, because they've been two of the better relievers in the country. And the fact that they have two guys in that Griffin Herring role, that's a difference from last year, where you have two guys who can go multiple innings and just have these shutdown innings. That's a big difference from last year on the pitching side. But I think Kate Anderson is definitely a candidate there as well. So, I probably pick Jones. I just don't feel great about whoever I'm picking, because I think Anderson and the two relievers are right there with him.
Probably a good problem to have. If we asked Jay Johnson, I'm sure he would sit there and avoid having to answer the question, because there's just so many guys he could say. And it's really a lot more about the collection of the team this year than it is one player, and that's probably a big reason why they've been so successful. Maybe who's been the biggest surprise player? Freshman, returnee, transfer, whatever it is.
I don't think anyone could have really predicted Kason Evans to be this good.
Yeah.
And I think heading into the year, he was kind of interesting. He was like an interesting sort of piece to me, because this is a guy who was like a good recruit, in sort of your typical very good college recruit, but he wasn't William Schmidt. He wasn't Derek Curriell. He wasn't Cade Aaronby from just a profile and like prospect standpoint, from the way Major League Baseball looked at him and all that sort of jazz. But I think cutting out the hitting aspect of his game really, really changed everything. It seems like it's changed everything for him, where he can concentrate on being a pitcher and go into the nuances of pitching and add a slider and add velocity, because you're not spending that extra energy as a hitter. So I don't think you could have reasonably expected him to be this good. Zach Cowan is another one too. But the things that he's good at least, I could have predicted that he would throw strikes. I could have predicted that his changeup was going to be tough to hit. Maybe not to this degree, though. But with Kason, with a freshman, you just have less of a handle on those sort of guys. And that's kind of why I'm picking Kaysen because I think Derek, we kind of knew heading into the year that he was going to be a starter every single day, just given the way that he was playing, not just in the fall, but also in the spring. So, that's I would have to go with Kaysen. There's a lot of candidates for that, too. I mean, I could also pick, like, Chris Stanfield, for example, or Ethan Fry. Heck, like, Ethan Fry's been one of their best. He's been one of the best hitters on the team. I think he's a higher isolated power percentage than anyone on the team. I think he leads the team in ISO, which is pretty crazy because they have Jared Jones.
Right.
Jones is second. But that's if you sort of mess with the qualifying at bat number a little bit on Fangraphs. So I was looking at that today. So like it's yes, of course I was.
I think Kaysen's a great pick because you go back to the preseason, not a lot of people were talking about him, except if you had gone to like all the scrimmages and the exhibitions and you'd seen him. But even then, like he was getting thrown out there, like he talked about in his availability today, like towards the end of the scrimmages and for relief stuff. He looked good, but it's kind of hard to make judgments based off what you see in those scrimmages. Whereas with Curiel, it was literally every time he was on the field, he was hitting a double. He was making a insane catch in the outfield, and he also was a guy that turned down the draft. I know Kaysen did as well, but maybe to a lesser degree. So, with other guys, Zach and Ethan, and, there's reasons to believe they could do what they did. Like, they were recruited that way. They'd done it at a prior school, whatever it is. With Kaysen, it was kind of just like, wow, this guy came out of nowhere, and he's shoving immediately.
In a way,
so.
Yeah. I think when he really got on my radar is I think I showed up to one of the scrimmages, and he was hitting 99. And I was kind of like, where did this come from? Because it just this was not on the radar whatsoever when it came to his profile as a high school recruit. So when I saw that, it was just something I wanted to keep in the back of my head. It wasn't something that I thought that, okay, he's going to be one of the best relievers in the country. Didn't expect that to happen, especially right away. But, heck, like that, and then you combine that. He hasn't really got up to 99 since then, but he's still, it's still 95 to 97, I'd say. So, and then he's got a really, really good changeup, too, to sort of pair with that. So, he's my call, but there's a bunch of other guys that you can make an argument for.
There you go. Okay, with that out of the way, I'm curious now, this isn't like a midseason award, but, at this point of the season, who's the one player, what's the one position group that is separating this team from being its best version of itself? Like Coach has said, like Jacob Myers, for example, if we can get him going, we're the best version of LSU baseball this year, and that hasn't come to fruition. Who, in your eyes, is that guy?
Well, there's two similar questions to this, right? That I can take this with two different answers, and so I'm going to give you two different answers to maybe a slightly different question that you just posed to me, but it's similar.
I'll allow it.
It's what needs to happen for this team to be the best it can be, as you just said, and what's the thing that they need to fix? What's the biggest quote unquote weakness with this team that is also kind of similar to the question that you asked, right?
Yeah.
The biggest weakness right now is the bullpen after the two guys that we've just talked about a lot. One of the main reasons why they were so good against Oklahoma is because they didn't have to go to anyone who has been shaky during, to say the least, during SEC play. And then to answer your specific question, it's Chase Shores.
Okay.
And I say that because given his potential and how good he was in that brief time as a that he showed as a freshman, and the fact that he's a 6'9" guy who can throw 99 miles an hour, all that oozing potential, right? And if he's at his best, this team goes another level. You know what I mean? Almost regardless of what the bullpen does, they go then another level, because then they have three guys who you could put at the top of the rotation, and no one else really has that. You know, not even Tennessee has that, as we saw this past weekend against Texas A&M. So he still has some work to do in order to be that guy. Even though he's still, I say that even though he's still way better than what they had last year on those game threes. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, it's still much improved. The fact you can have a guy who can reliably go 4 to 5 innings while keeping you in the game. The only game where that wasn't the case was the Texas game. That's also in part because the offense was struggling that day.
Yes.
So He's looked a little bit better the last 2 starts than he did in the first 2. I think the line this past week was definitely skewed a decent bit because of the weather.
Yeah.
But I thought he also looked a little bit better than his line suggested in his start against Mississippi State, because it was 1 pretty bad inning and then 3 good innings. So
and then it was shortened because he got hit in the face with the ball. So
yeah,
he probably could have put up another.
I mean, yes,
that was the plan.
I mean, I guess you could have. I think ideally you wanted him to go 1 more inning, and I think the ball definitely stopped him from going 1 more inning, but you still got 4 out of him, and that was he still looked better, and it was still an improvement over what you saw against Texas. That was just the week before. So if he can get to the level where even Anthony where Anthony Ianson is, or even close to what Cade Anderson is, that's when this team kind of goes up another level in terms of what is it going to take for this team to reach its ceiling. In terms of like raising the floor, though, and just trying to eliminating like the bad stuff, like the actual bad stuff, it's the bullpen and those guys after Cowan and Evans stepping up. And I think yesterday's game was all about where those guys are at right now and which guys could potentially step up, because right now it seems like it's a different guy every single week, because it was like Jaden Newt seemed like a good candidate for that after throwing 2 shutout innings against Mississippi State, and then he struggles on Tuesday. William Schmidt struggles against Texas and Missouri, and then he pitches well this week. So it's like trying to find someone who isn't. I don't think you could reasonably ask for those guys to be Cowan or Evans. Like that's not
going to
crazy.
happen.
Yeah, it's probably not going to happen.
At least not right now.
Yeah,
maybe in a month or 2.
But like what you want is you put him in the game and you feel like, all right, we can get out of this inning. Mm-hmm. You feel comfortable and confident about that. And none of those guys are at that point right now. But I'm not saying any of those guys can't get there, because in terms of their talent, they can. We just haven't seen it, And there just isn't enough evidence to feel that way yet.
Well, because Cade Anderson's not going to throw a complete game every week, 135 pitches, right?
No way.
And Ianson and Shores did their job. But the point is that, if you're going to use a Anderson-Cowan pairing on Friday and an Ianson-Evans pairing on Saturday, someone's got to replace Chase Shores on Sunday, right? So you got to find that 6th, that 7th pitcher and that 3rd and 4th option out of the bullpen, be it a righty or a lefty. Are there any guys that you're banking on fulfilling those roles? Anybody that you're maybe a little bit confident can take over those spots in the next couple weeks?
I think you have to be a little bit confident of all the guys who literally pitched yesterday. Because I think those were the guys. And I think Jay even said that, was it today or last night? I don't
Probably
remember.
both, but remind the people who the 3 were.
For sure.
It was 4 of them, right?
So 4 of them pitched, and you can even throw Maverick Rizzi and Cooper Williams into that conversation because they didn't. Yeah, I think they were warming up and they didn't end up pitching. But Connor Ware started the game, so I guess we'll just start with him. That's a guy who I thought could contend for the rotation, and right now that hasn't been the case. Not because of stuff, I think it's because of strikes, and he's just not throwing strikes consistently enough right now to be relied on for long stretches in SEC play. He's had some successful inning stints here and there, but even, for example, like the Mississippi State game, which is the last SEC appearance he had, he walked 2 batters in that scoreless inning, and like I don't know how many times you can get away with that without getting burnt at some point. But I thought he was all right against Nicholls State. I thought he did a good job of keeping the ball up in the zone, which is kind of the key for him, because fastball up, pair it with his breaking stuff, pair it with his off-speed stuff that starts up and ends down, right? So you're moving the hitter's eyes, the top of the plate, the bottom of the plate. And the reason why that fastball plays, you want that fastball to play up, is because he's one of the few guys in this team where he's really good at induced vertical break, which basically means that when the ball's at the top of the zone, it looks like it's rising. And that sort of fastball movement gets a lot of guys to chase up. And I think that's the best way to explain why Ty Floyd, when he was on 2 years ago, I know this was before you got here, but when he was on 2 years ago, like he had 17 strikeouts against Florida in the College World Series final. And it's because he had this like ghost fastball, basically. He'd throw it at the top of the zone, and those Florida hitters just kept on swinging and missing at that pitch at the top of the zone. And that was the best he's ever looked. And he also gave us some home runs because he left the ball up. And sometimes when you leave the ball up, you can be prone to some of that stuff. But Ware hasn't been prone to that as much. Part of it's because of the balls. But I also think that he's a guy who I sort of look at, if he can just throw strikes a little bit more consistently and be a little bit more competitive with that fastball at the top of the zone, that's someone who I think could really, really help this team out. And I don't think it's like a mechanical issue with him. So I don't think it's like he's that far away from it. I think it's more of a command thing than a control thing. So that's a guy to really watch out for. I'd say in terms of guys to step up. I mean, William Schmidt, obviously last night, 4 shutout innings, 8 strikeouts. For him, it's all about, again, locating the fastball, not throwing that pitch over the middle of the plate, because when he throws that over the middle of the plate, not a ton of movement, not a ton of deception to it, he can get hit pretty hard. And we saw that against Texas. We saw that against Missouri. So if he can locate the fastball on the edges and then do a good job of landing his breaking ball, because he hasn't been commanding that pitch quite as well. Last night he was commanding it well, which was a big difference for him, and he said it to us after the game. So I think those two guys, obviously guys to watch out for. Jaden Newt, as I mentioned earlier, there's been a lot of talk about him. Sinker, changeup, fastball. The strikes are important for him as well, even though he's still more around the zone than he was at the very beginning of last year. And then the last guy was Connor Bench
for a little while.
Yeah, and he looked better last night. But the strikes are kind of an issue for him as well, even though the stuff is pretty good. I mean, it's a mid-90s fastball with a very, very good slider. The problem is that, and he's also he's pretty useful in this specific sense, and Jay's talked about this a few times, where they can just bring him in the middle of an inning, and you don't have to worry about him like having to ease himself into the game or ease himself into an outing, right? Like,
what do y'all call it? The fire hose?
Like the fireman kind of role, right? If there's a fire in the house, you get the fireman to come in and immediately take out the fire. That's kind of what he is. And he just has to be more consistent within that role, and that consistency just comes from the strikes. And if you're talking about the staff from a bigger picture sense, the strikes are still kind of an issue for this team. Maybe not quite as much as last year. Last year was pretty extreme, but I think this year it's still kind of a bugaboo for this team.
Yeah, for whatever reason. But they'll keep attacking it. The point is that the guys that matter right now, that like are your core, 5, I guess, they are throwing strikes. They are pitching well. So that's good. Now it's just a matter of, can you find a couple more, because you're going to need them, as you get deeper into the season, when you got to play 5 and 6 games in a row or whatever it is, Hoover NCAA tournament. Yeah. Zooming out on that note, 34 games in, from what you've seen, have your opinions changed on what the ceiling for this team is? I feel like you thought preseason they'd be a national championship contender. A lot of people would have said that. Yeah. Where do you think they are now? If it's changed at all.
Honestly, it's the same, because I'm not saying that because I'm not saying that because I'm underwhelmed by their 31-3 start. It's nothing to do with that. It's everything to do with the fact that we already set the bar this high.
Right. And it's like that every year, right?
Yeah, and it's like that every year. And they're actually hitting the bar that's that high. Mm-hmm. So I would keep it as, I would say it's honestly that simple.
Okay. No, I'm with you there. But to your point, tough games coming up, tough series coming up. Mm-hmm. So, maybe run me through in these last couple minutes what we're looking at, what to expect. How do you think LSU finishes here? They've gotten off to a great start. I think, the bar is like 20 SEC wins you want to get to be a national seed. And that obviously
18-20.
Yeah. You think they get there, and kind of what are they looking at back half of the season?
So we can do some back in the napkin math right now, right? So right now they're 10-2 in conference play. So that's 12 games. They play a 30-game SEC schedule. Also at the end of this weekend against Auburn, they'll be exactly at the halfway point through the SEC schedule. 15
games.
Yeah. And say they win this weekend series, which should be their goal, and what we should at least at least somewhat expect, right? Even though Auburn's a solid team.
Oh, yeah. They're what, top 15, right?
Yeah.
Just on the edge of the top 10?
But besides Georgia, they haven't played a team at this level of the SEC yet. Mm-hmm. So I think if you're LSU, you want to come into this series, you want to win this series, say they win it, and maybe they don't sweep, because it's hard to sweep back-to-back road series in the SEC. That sounds like
I wanted to ask about that today, but
maybe not an impossible task, but a very tough task. So they say they win that series, they'll be 12-3, and
if they take 2 out of 3,
they take 2 out of 3. So they win that series, they'll be 12-3, and then really what you want to do after that is win at least 6 to 8. They got to win at least 6, probably 8 to 10 more games over the next 15, which I think is realistic. Which is I think is like quite realistic, because maybe not 10, because that would be 23 wins. Man, they'd be like the number 1 overall seed if they got the 23 wins.
I mean, it's possible.
It is possible. Don't get me wrong.
A lot of these big series are at home, which helps.
Yeah, and they don't have to win them necessarily. They don't. That's what the Auburn series. That's a long way in saying that. Like, that's what the Auburn series, if you win it, affords you to do. Like, if you win that series, or even if you win a game, like, you don't have to win the Tennessee series. You don't have to win the Arkansas series in order to be a national seed. You have to probably win at least a game in those series. Don't get me wrong. Like, a sweep is bad, and I think this team might be a little bit too good to be swept this season, but I've been wrong in the past.
You don't say.
Yeah. But yeah, I think overall, I think that this weekend is important in terms of setting yourself up better for the second half when the schedule gets even tougher, and it just increases your margin for error, like any series does, but especially with this one, because after that it gets tough. Like, I know Auburn just beat Alabama in a series, so you're going to be favored in that series, maybe even heavily, depending on what happens this weekend. And then, like we've talked about a ton of times, then Tennessee, A&M, Arkansas, and A&M just beat Tennessee, so you can't take them lightly at all, and that A&M series is also on the road. So like, those 3 series are going to be big, and if they can go, like, they don't have to go over 500 in those series to be a national seed, you know. They could be a game or 2 under 500 and still be in a decent position to be a national seed if they win this weekend. If they don't win this weekend series, then there's a little bit more pressure in the back half to be that national seed, not to miss the tournament or not be a regional host, because I think they're pretty close to locked in on a regional host, and they're locked into being in the tournament unless they lose every game from here on out, and they're not going to. They're in a good spot right now overall. Like, you can't really complain, right? I know they're technically third in the SEC because there's a tie right now between the top 2 teams and Texas, who have had an unbelievable start to the year that no one really expected, and Arkansas, of course. But I mean, you're sitting there right there in third. You're a game back of those 2 teams. You're facing one of them still. Texas could come back to earth in the second half. You never know. Like, they still have a shot of winning the whole SEC as well. So lot to play for, obviously. But they're in a pretty good spot, all things considered, when it comes to just doing the math of being a national seed, which should be the goal every year for this team.
Very ahead of schedule. Last year they didn't win, I think, 10 SEC games until late April.
I think it was
early
the last
May.
week. It was heading into the last weekend of the season of the SEC slate, where they had the sweep Ole Miss to get the 13 wins, and now they're at 10 already.
Yeah.
So
and it's the first
wild
couple days of April. So yeah, they're in a really good spot, and just more to gain. Continue to pad that resume. But with that said, like last year, they quickly got the train back on the tracks. The train can quickly come off the tracks for this team. We don't see that as a possibility, but you never know. I mean, you're one injury away, God forbid. You're one bad series away from losing that momentum and having to redefine and rediscover yourself. So right now it's good, but a lot of tests ahead. Alabama, Tennessee, Arkansas, A&M, even, a road series against South Carolina will be tricky with the whole Maneri thing and whatnot. And so
that's true.
All right, let's get out of here. Give him a follow. Keep up with him for great LSU baseball coverage. And, you can follow us too if you want. But, he's your guy, in my opinion. So thanks for watching. Much appreciated. We'll check back in later on this season, maybe before the postseason, and give you the latest on LSU baseball. But for now, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll catch you guys next time.